and I got a few cases, and the very first case I did, I'll never forget him because he was the lighthouse keeper's son at Whitley Bay Lighthouse. And it was really quite, I got really involved in his story, you know, and I probably went a bit too far because I was looking into lighthouses and where his dad had worked and everything. I went OTT with that research, you know.
What attracted you to that story then?
It was just the fact that it was, you know, it was the lighthouse, Whitley Bay Lighthouse, and just the thought of the lighthouse keeper's son. Really, it just really, you know, he wasn't very old when he had gone to fight, and he wasn't very old when he died. And for me, I'm interested in the whole project, but the part that appeals to me most is the sort of the social side and the men and the family and what happened to the family, you know, in their background. I'm very interested in that side. I get so involved with the tales of the families. And my initial idea was Preston Cemetery in North Shields, because I live across the road from there, and it's a Victorian cemetery, and the gates are really quite magnificent, you know, and I thought that would look really nice if it was all covered in poppies for World War I. So I took the idea to the Northumbria World War I executive committee, and I proposed it to them, and they all endorsed it. And then I arranged to meet with the cemetery manager for North Shields, and I chatted with her, and she was all for it. That was great, you know. And then we started to put the appeal out for people to make and knit crochet poppies. And my initial thought was just to have Preston Cemetery, but we've now got over 4,000 knitted in crochet poppies, so we've now extended it with the permission of the cemetery manager and the 7 local authority cemeteries in North Tyneside. So we'll be decorating the gates of Preston Cemetery, Church Bank Cemetery in Wallsend, Holy Cross Cemetery in Wallsend, St Bartholomew's in Benton, Dudley Cemetery, Whitley Bay Cemetery and Ersden Cemetery. That's the 7 cemeteries that we're doing.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Sitting here now while the project's coming to an end, what's one of your gut feelings about it, or achievements?
Well, I think it really has achieved. It's achieved a lot, and I think it's helped explain the period a lot. I mean, I'm going to miss the sort of day-to-day involvement, although it'll still be, you know, it's an organic thing. It's still going to grow. I'll still be involved in that way, but the writing of the articles is going to come to an end, and there'll be certain things that'll come to an end, but the project itself is not really finishing, you know. I don't think anybody feels like it's finishing. Yeah, and I mean it has helped to explain in other ways that, you know, maybe you might not have learned at school. It showed the effect of the war on a community, and that's the thing that I've been really interested in. And actually, you know about the little map that we have, and you click on that, and I mean that has explained an awful lot of things about the project, and it's been shown. House of Commons, House of Lords, Imperial War Museum. I've described it as the best bit of film to explain the effect of war on a community.
I always knew I had a great uncle who died in World War I, and as a child in the 40s I could remember seeing his name on the War Memorial in Smithstocks Park. Peter S. Case. That was all I knew, just his name engraved on a monument. And a friend told me of a World War I project based in Linskill School, North Shields. So I arranged to meet Alan Fiedler on the off chance that he might have some information on Peter Case in his records. And I was amazed to hear about all the work and dedication of the volunteers who were preparing a database of the dead in World War I who lived in North Shields, Tynemouth and the surrounding areas. Since my visit to Linskill School last week, I now know where Peter Strashine Case lived, the date he died and where he died, and the memorial in France where he is remembered. He enlisted in the 21st Northumberland Fusiliers, Tyneside Scottish, and he was killed in action in France the 23rd of April 1917, and he was only 21 years old. And I have the names of his parents and siblings. I now know he worked in Smithstocks shipyard, hence his name appears on the Smithstocks monument. I'm beginning to get an idea of how he lived and where he lived in North Shields. But the most wonderful thing for me, I'll finish it off for you, the most wonderful thing for me is that I have a photograph of my great uncle Peter, a handsome young man of 20, because I think that must have been taken before. And this is the only picture our family has of him. I was made very welcome in my visits to the project office. Everyone was very helpful. No question was left unanswered, with patience and understanding on every detail. It was quite an emotional time for me to learn so much about my great uncle. And at last, Peter has been reclaimed by his loving family. But what a young man, just that's terrible. And he was at the front for 10 months, just at that age, you know. And his name is on the memorial in Arras. And I was quite touched as well, because there was a photograph that I was given in an email, and members of the project had gone to visit the war graves, you know. And here was a picture I have received of a hand holding a cross with a poppy on, pointing to his name on the memorial. I was quite touched to think somebody had done that, you know, just let me see that it was there. I think I would like to go myself one day to see it.
Did you have any personal connection with the project?
Not directly, but I was asked to do an interview about Private John Thomas Wakeling. He died in 1918 in France. And Wakeling is a name that's in my family. I have a cousin called Jean. And I hadn't spoken to Jean in 20-30 years, but I rang her out of the blue and asked is it possible to interview her, which I did. And that was quite a moment for me, because it meant I met someone who I hadn't seen for a while, and she told me quite a bit about the family.
That you didn't know?
She did tell me a story about when the casualty, when John came home on leave one time, his wife, which is her grandmother, had said that he came in, knocked on the door, came in, didn't speak to anyone, just went into the backyard, and his wife thought, oh goodness, what's happening, because he took a knife out of the drawer. He went into the backyard. She thought he was going to do something to himself, but what he did was he stripped off and he started to scrape his skin, because there was lice and everything on his skin, and he didn't want to dirty the house. He wanted to be clean when he came back in. That was Jean's grandmother, the casualty's wife, actually told her.
You know, I've been in tears more than once, because you get so involved in what happened to these people that you feel that you've got a connection to them. And you read some of the really sad stories, there's some of the hardships, and it does have a profound effect.
I see you also interviewed a couple of people this
I did, yes, I did.
Do you remember any of them?
Oh yes, I can remember a few. Very, very interesting. And one lady, when I went to her house, she had so much memorabilia, showing me some wonderful old photographs, embroidered handkerchiefs and embroidered pictures that had been sent home. Sorry, not handkerchiefs, but embroidered pieces of cloth and photographs that had been sent home from someone on the front. And it was just amazing to see these things and touch them and know the origins of them, you know. Made you feel so proud.
That was part of the reason I wanted to get involved with the World War I project, because there was a link between my regiment and those soldiers that were killed in the First World War. but it was quite a long process to get it done, and it'd been protracted. And people were wondering what was happening with the plaques, but it was because they wanted to check to make sure everything was right.
And then your role was to physically put it up, was that right?
That's right, yeah. Go down there. I used to go, most of the time it was difficult to get in touch with people, apart from the weekend, so I had to spend a lot of weekends just going in, trying to not knock them out of bed, but making sure that they were up and around, and then getting permission to put the plaque, confirm permission to put the plaque up again. So it's been a long process.
What did you ever speak to the residents of the houses to see how they felt about it? I mean, did you get any comments after you knocked them up out of bed?
Well, most of the time was, yeah, just stick it up. But one or two came out and they wanted to know about it, and I was able to tell them that the website was on the plaque itself, who the person was that could research that. Actually, it was wonderful to have the boards put up and the plaques at the same time, so they're linking together. And it was nice to be involved with that sort of thing. And particularly when Alan arranged a sort of commemoration where it was able to get relatives there. And they've had quite a few of those, and they've had at least 10 that I'm aware of. And some of them have been quite well representative from the relatives' point of view.
Mm-hmm. It must be very emotional when the family come back to the house.
Well, certainly, I mean, some of them have certainly come from Australia. And I know, I'm not sure about Canada, and I think there was possibly some from Canada, but people have come from down south, the south of England, for that weekend and just to see the plaque put up. So yeah, it's been quite emotional in that respect.
But the garden's moved on since then, hasn't it?
Well, yes, unfortunately, Valerie, who was really the instigator of the garden and did a lot of the work linked in with the Scouts, unfortunately, she's died now. She died a few months ago, and there didn't seem to be anybody to take over. And because of the work, I think that I did before, clean it up, and I did a little bit in the garden with Valerie, but at the time I wanted to get on with research. So I said, once again I got caught, and I said I will do the garden, which I've started to do, and we're getting into it. This year has been a pretty heavy year. Started last winter. I managed to get a hold of the greenhouse at Linskill because I found out later that it cost them a lot of money to do the hanger baskets. So this year I've done planters and hanger baskets to keep the costs down.
Right. My grandfather was John Tom Kenster, and his brother was Horatio Druce Kenster. And I used to move around the salt and pepper and the little butter dish, which I've still kept, I've still got, knives and forks. And I used to think, Grandad, what are you doing? And it was years later I realised, I thought, he's been talking about the First World War and what he did.
Your granddad's experience in the war was traumatic.
It was. On the first day of the Somme, by then his brother was with him, and my granddad was a corporal, and the sergeant somewhere along the line shouted, "Kempster forward," and unfortunately it was his brother who jumped forward immediately and he was blown up.
And what about you as an individual? Have you enjoyed being part of the project?
I have. I've met lovely people, really nice people. It's been really interesting. They found information which has been an enormous help to me, because I had been started doing the family tree and I had been really interested, and through their great efforts, and I'm eternally grateful, they give me information which about Uncle Horatio I didn't know, and that was a joy, because we didn't know what he looked like, we didn't know what he was like, other than like little things Grandad talked about, but then he never really talked a lot about them as such. And it suddenly, for all you didn't have a face, you suddenly had your uncle, and you thought he did this job and he lived here. So yeah, that was fantastic. I've really enjoyed that side.
And it wasn't until I got involved with the project and started researching other people and thought, hang on, here's men who died of flu and some unsavoury diseases, and they're recognised as war dead. And yet your granda, who'd lost his eyes, developed epilepsy, is in an unmarked grave.
I know.
6 months after that, I get the contact from CWGC saying, we have investigated the case of Sergeant Andrew Neal, and in our opinion, he is inadequately commemorated. We would like to erect a headstone.
There was a few tears.
There was.
Finished work, tried to decide what to do, and then you said, do you fancy doing a bit at the memorial garden? I thought, yeah, I'll give it a go, you know. And it's one of the most satisfying things I think I've done for a long, long time. And I've met some fantastic people, and it does get inside you, just the whole thing, especially, and it's a little bit like giving back to me granddad in a way, isn't it, you know?
Yeah, I know what you mean, because like if it hadn't been for the project, we wouldn't have got the headstone, and so it's getting something back. And I said, I'll start on the Whitley Bay names, and you get a lot of Gibsons and Robsons, and I saw that name, Waldemar Brunstrom. I thought, I'll have a look at him. So, as you know, I do the general CWGC, you get the military background, and then you start finding out about the family. And I'll never forget, I was going through the census, you know, starting at 1911 and working back, 1911, and he's living along at South Parade. 1901 census, can you remember when I found out that on the 1901 census he lived in this house?
It's hard to believe.
Yeah, and then getting to go and visit his grave last year.